Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Joey G. This is Raw vs. Nitro Pt.2. That's right, baby. Told you I'd be coming back. I told you I'd be doing something with the Monday nights, my Monday Night Wars, and I am. This is part 2, and where I left off last night was actually the first Nitro from the Mall of America in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And it's when Lex Luger walked out, and 15 hours before that, he was wrestling for the WWE, and he was a big star in the WWE, but the WWE didn't know what to do with Lex Luger. They tried to make him into the next Hulk Hogan, and it didn't work out. And little by little, you see Luger jumped to Nitro. And then Raw was, Nitro won like 3 weeks in a row, but they didn't kill Raw, but it was back and forth the rest of that year, 95. And then remember, Raw had some pretty good Raws back then, even though Nitro was kind of corny. It was that Dungeon of Doom shit. That was corny with Kevin Sullivan and that monster thing that was his dad. Then Halloween Havoc 95 when the Big Show, he was called the Giant then, a.k.a. Paul White, fell off the roof of the Cobo Center next to the Joe Louis Arena. And all of a sudden he comes down, walking down fine to the match against and actually his first match, he fought Hulk Hogan in the main event of Halloween Havoc 1995 for WCW. And the Big Show's first match, when he says, my first match ever, I became the world champion, he did. He beat Hulk Hogan. And then this Yeti thing was a mummy came to the ring, and the Big Show had Hogan in a bear hug, and the Yeti was behind him. And it looked like Hogan was getting, like, double teamed by the Yeti in the Big Show. I mean, it was so retarded. And then at the end, all you hear is Bobby Heenan say, "You'll never see a pay-per-view like this again." And he was damn right. I mean, I was just like, wow, WCW stories were just over the top. But then, 95 ended. And you remember the Medusa throwing the women's title in the trash can, and I bet you she regrets that now because she'll never go to the WWE Hall of Fame. I mean, to do that to Vince McMahon on national TV, Vince doesn't forget things. And I don't think anybody in the McMahon family or anybody in the WWE is going to forget that night. I mean, she trashed the women's title in the trash can in November of 95. They were back and forth. Then 96 came, and Shawn Michaels was getting hot. And I'm not just, you know what I mean, he was the best. He is the best wrestler. He's my favorite wrestler, and anybody has an argument, it's crazy. People say Bret Hart is. No, he's not. The WWE was winning their ratings because they had the Click. They had, Shawn, Diesel, and they were winning. I mean, Nitro had Hogan, Savage, Flair, the Dungeon of Doom, and they were doing good. They were getting good ratings. They were going back and forth. Like, neither one was winning. They were going back and forth. 1 week Nitro would win, 1 week Raw would win. That's how it was for 96. Then the rumor came out, and around February, Scott Hall gave his notice. All right. Then Kevin Nash tells Vince, I'm staying. I'm not going anywhere. Then calls Vince back 2 days later and says, but there's all this money down there. So then you got two guys, Scott Hall, my other favorite wrestler, and Kevin Nash, one of my favorite wrestlers, a.k.a. Diesel, as you know him. And WCW, they were in WCW, if you remember before that. Diesel, Kevin Nash was Oz. He left as Vinny Vegas. That was his back then. That was his best character back then in WCW was Vinny Vegas. He was Oz, the Master Blaster. He stunk. I mean, WCW nearly ruined his career. Scott Hall was the diamond stud. He was getting over, but they would just have DDP do his talking for him. And they went to WWE, and what happened? Scott Hall became Razor Ramon. He was actually the first bad guy that was cool. And then you had Diesel, Kevin Nash, and if you remember, everybody talks about Austin flipping people off in the Sandman. Royal Rumble 1996, after Diesel screwed The Undertaker in the title match against Bret Hart. Kevin Nash, a.k.a. Diesel, turned around and flipped The Undertaker off. He was the first one. Kevin Nash was the first one in WWE to flip somebody off. Not Stone Cold and not the Sandman. Well, maybe the Sandman did. ECW was crazy, but this isn't about ECW. This is about the WWF, WWE against WCW, Raw vs. Nitro, the Monday Night Wars. And remember, you had Monday Night Football at this time. But Nitro was getting hot. And then, all of a sudden, it goes through Shawn won the title at WrestleMania. And then all of a sudden, Raw's doing good. Raw's starting to win the ratings again. And all of a sudden, Scott Hall walks out in Macon, Georgia on Nitro. And then 2 weeks later, Kevin Nash walks out. And then that was it. And then June 12th, 1996, for 83 weeks in a row, Raw got squashed. And I'm going to go into it in detail. A little bit. The NWO was formed. Everybody knows July of 1996. Hulk Hogan came down. You know, Bobby Heenan kind of gave it away when he said, but whose side is he on? I mean, I knew. As soon as Hogan walked out, I knew it's him. I didn't know. I really didn't think it was going to be Hogan as the NWO member. I thought it was going to be Bret Hart. Because if you remember, after Bret lost to Shawn at that WrestleMania, his contract was up. But the WCW wouldn't know what to do with a Shawn Michaels or an Undertaker. Like, I mean, Undertaker was in WCW before, but he was mean marked. And as you know, as he left and became the Undertaker, and he's an all-around star now. You know what I mean? He's one of the best wrestlers ever. But, I mean, like, WCW wouldn't know what to do with a Bret the Hitman Hart. You know what I'm saying? But he ended up signing back with WWE because they were all saying, you just lost Kev, you lost Scott, Jeff Jarrett, Piper, I mean, DiBiase, Sean Waltman, X-Pac. They're all going down there. And you're going to let Bret go, too? So Vince was really caught between, even though he really didn't want to sign Bret back. He wanted to go with the youth. Bret was 38 years old in 96. So, you know what I mean? So, you know what I mean? But Bret signed a 20-year contract. A 20-year deal. I remember he was on that Raw when he was like, I'll be with the WWF forever. 20-year deal. He signed at 38 years old. So, he would have been 50. I mean, I think he's like 50-something now. I mean, no, he's like nearly 60. Because Hogan's 61. He's a couple years younger than Hogan. But, I mean, that with Bret signing back. But Nitro, when the NWO was formed, and then Hogan won the title, and then DiBiase was there, and then the Kid was in the crowd, X-Pac, Sean Waltman, another one of my favorite wrestlers. He was in the crowd. I mean, the NWO just took over. Then the music, and then the merchandise. I mean, it was just exploded. But the WWE still was on tap. I mean, at that time, I remember that Shawn was champion, and everybody was blaming it on Shawn, and I'm, you know, yeah, Shawn is my favorite wrestler. I mean, what was he going to do? He was all by himself. They weren't even letting him team with his buddy Triple H, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, you know, because Hunter was the heel with China at that time. He was the grinning snob still. And Shawn was like, you know, you let Scott, you let the rest of my buddies go down south. You know what I mean? So, but WWE was still keeping up. I remember Shawn had some good matches with Sid. I remember that match he had with Vader at SummerSlam 96. I mean, that was Shawn Michaels basically bullying Vader the whole friggin' match. But 1996, from July of 96, I think to July of 97, WWE started coming back the summer of 97. And I'll get into the whole 1997 on part 3. But 1996, like the end of that year, was just all WCW. Piper came back. Of course, he won at Starrcade that year in Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm wrapping it up here. Piper put Hogan to sleep, but it wasn't for the title. Everybody was cheering, thinking they were going to hand Roddy Piper the WCW World title, and Piper just won the match. That was the stupid shit WCW would do. You know what I'm saying? But there's a lot more to this. I'm going to go into all 1997 and wait till I hit the Attitude Era, and when Nitro was even getting better, and they were head at head, I mean, coming at each other. When Eric challenged Vince, I'm going to get into all that. This is part 2. I would still say, what, I got about part 3 and at least another part 4 to do. But tune in. This is Joey G, Raw vs. Nitro part 2. I'll have part 3 for you tomorrow night. This is Joey G. Tune into my big videos, especially on Saturday with all the top news in wrestling. Also, Raw was awesome last night. That Paul Heyman, John Cena skit, out of this world. One of the best promos ever. Maybe even better than the CM Punk Punch Bomb. I don't know. But Paul Heyman, I'm a Paul Heyman guy. That's all I got to say. And I'm Joey G. I'm a Joey G guy. And I'm out. Peace.